Hello and welcome to this ET Now special telecast. Our guest today is not only one of India's most powerful bankers, but arguably one of India's most powerful women. Arundhati Bhattacharya, chairman of SBI and the first woman to be the chairman of the state bank in its over 70-year history. Such a pleasure chatting with you, ma'am. I want to start off by talking about something that you had raised a red flag on, which is now becoming a concern for the broader economy, which is this issue of farm loan waiver. And now there seems to be this competition among states to dole out this, this farm loan waiver. How worried are you on the implication that this could have to the broader economy?
We need to look at a longer term instead of concentrating on what is happening now. As soon as a loan waiver happens, actually my books look better because the money comes back to the banks only. But going forward, the fact is we have to ensure the farmers that they get remunerative price, and for that we need much more larger reforms or longer term strategies.
You don't believe this vitiates credit discipline? The reason I'm asking is there are now reports that there are several farmers who are in a position to repay loans and are still defaulting. Do you see that trend happening?
See, it is very early days to talk about trends, okay? It's very early days. So we don't really know how far things will go. But I think at the end of the day, the farmer is also aware that for the next crop he will come back to the bank. And therefore, to that extent, many of them are very cooperative with us. So again, as I said, we should not concentrate on something that is happening now, rather we should look for solutions in the medium to the long term.
This issue I want to talk about, which is sort of burning, is the telecom sector and the stress there. You had written a letter as well, and soon after, in an interview to ET Now, the finance minister said that the government or the Department of Telecom and the TRA cannot preside over the death of telecom, raising concerns on what's happening in this sector. How alarming is the situation? We understand that the exposure to the banking system as a whole is about 8 lakh crores, while to SBI it's sort of minimal.
No, it is not. It is not very worrying. Because you may have read reports in the press also that the exposure to the Indian banking sector is not that huge. Plus, all of the exposure is not going to go away. It might impact a few of the weaker companies. For that, we are adequately prepared. And I don't really think, that it is something that's going to take on major proportions. Having said that, just as the steel ministry had taken a few steps in order to address the genuine distress of that industry, so also the ministry over here should look at the current situation on the ground to determine whether there is any genuine stress and whether any steps need to be taken proactively. Because it's better to be proactive in taking the steps rather than to try to revive something after things have gone very wrong. So that is the reason why we have been proactive. Again, the letter that you are mentioning, first of all, it was written in the capacity as a representative of the banks, not in my capacity as chairman of SBI, and it was a representation in order to ensure that people were aware of the challenges that the environment was throwing up.
We understand that the interministerial group is also meeting banks.
That's right.
Over the next couple of days as well. In your view, who should take a cut? Should the government take a cut in terms of the revenues that it's collecting, whether it's through reduction of license fees or spectrum user charges? Is that the most obvious way to give some relief to the sector?
See, at this point of time, it's difficult for me to say who should take a cut. Nobody will want to take a cut. Sure. But yes, the realization can be spread out over a longer period. Because again, as I said, at this point of time, at least, even though there is a lot of innovation, I think the next innovation has to be telepathy after telecom. As that doesn't seem to be on the horizon, I think telecom is here to stay for a while. Therefore, maybe, spreading it out over a longer period could be one of the things that alleviates immediate stress. So we'll see, the meetings have to take place as yet. And I'm sure that the group that is meeting is aware of the situation and will try and find some way of addressing the issue.
Do you think banks could also use spectrum as collateral? Is that an option?
That is a thing that we have always asked for, and I think it is correct that that should be allowed, because at the end of the day we do want to have some security, and if you show it as a secured lending, to that extent even our capital requirements come down. We are able to pass on whatever is the savings on the cost to that extent. But if it is not allowed to be used as security, then obviously these things have an added cost to the lendings.
So you don't believe telecom could be the new steel, or do you think that's
no.
That's an exaggeration?
It is much smaller, much smaller than steel.
Sure.
And again, it is not something that can be imported. So to that extent, it is something that is domestic.
I want to talk about the NPA issue, because you've been in the helm of SBI at a pretty challenging time for the industry as a whole, and you've seen this whole NPA crisis up close and personal. Many in the market, ma'am, believe that the NPA issue is sort of beyond resolution, because what people believe is that we're just sort of kicking the can down the road without really arriving at a concrete solution to fix the problem. Is that your view as well?
No, I don't really think it's the view. In fact, I think we are getting better by the day, in the sense that more and more provisions are getting created by the banks. So whatever are the weak assets, we are covering them with as much amount of provisions as we may need to take haircuts. So to that extent, I think we are at the end of the cycle, towards the end of the cycle. And in respect of many of the accounts which were earlier suffering from under capacity utilization, there we are seeing capacities coming up. I can give you, for example, a few roads. The roads, when they did the original traffic studies, when they actually got built, the traffic was much lower. Therefore, there was a stress in actually servicing the loans. Again, if you remember, the loans were given for short periods of time. But with time, the traffic is climbing. If you look at Mumbai airport, for instance, I don't know, have you ever been there in the morning? I am sure you must have been. Have you seen the snaking lines over there? That was not there 2.5, 3 years back. Okay. So capacity utilization of infrastructure is going up. Even the power, I can tell you, because in the last 3 years we have not added any capacity, excepting completion of the capacity that was already started. Give it another 3 years and all of this will be required. See, we are a young country and we are growing by the day. If you stop putting in more capacity, then the utilization will go up. As the utilization goes up, the ability to service those loans comes back. So to that extent, I think we are heading towards a better side rather than towards a worse side. At this point of time, you know, what is being sought is a comprehensive resolution, so that we can say done and over. Maybe that is not happening immediately, but it will happen. And again, as I said, as the days go, I think things are looking better rather than worse.
Sure. You know, Mr. A.M. Nayak, one of the tall leaders of corporate India, in an interview said that he believes only 1/3 of this so-called massive NPA accounts will get resolved. That's his view as industry. Would you share that view, or do you think a lot more could get resolved?
It depends from industry to industry. And in any case, you know, in all industry there is consolidation. Okay. Every industry, as it comes to a certain level of maturity, there is consolidation. In that consolidation, some fall, but the men will always be there. You know, it's the boys that get slaughtered, I would say. So that differentiation between men and boys in any industry will happen.
The one criticism of the ordinance is that the central bank could be taking decisions which are purely commercial decisions, which should be taken by commercial bankers. How would you counter that?
Actually, we don't know what the central bank is going to do. Till we know what they are going to do, for me to opine on something is really a little premature.
Sure. Let's talk about SBI specifically, ma'am, because post the merger with associate banks, you know, your exposure, the consolidated book in terms of its exposure to additional NPA stresses sort of increased a little bit. In Q4 numbers reflect that your watch list has increased to 32,000 crores and GNPA at about 9%. Investors are worried that it could get worse. You said for the economy as a whole, it's on the road to recovery. Would the same picture hold for SBI?
I don't think so, and when you say investors are worried, I don't think they are worried. If they were worried, I wouldn't have such a fantastic response to our QIP. As you know, for a 15,000 crore issue, we had bids to the extent of 27,000 crores, and all of the bids came in at strike. So to that extent, I don't think investors are worried. I think investors are beginning to see what we have done with SBI. In fact, this year, this time in the fourth quarterly result investor conference, we had very few queries on the main bank. Yes, there are concerns about the associates we have brought together. Now, I would only say this to the industry at large. You had the same concerns 3 years back about us, and you have seen where we have brought it. So we will merely do the same thing for the associates. Give us a few quarters and you will see that they will also be firing with all guns.
At the consolidated level, Ms. Bhattacharya, what is SBI's exposure to the top 30-40 NPA accounts? Because that is what is kind of being talked about, the government's intent to fix them. What is SBI's exposure? How much have you provisioned and how much do you need to provision?
About my top 50 accounts will comprise about 45% of my NPA numbers. Of the solo. Of the consolidated I wouldn't have, but of the solo it was around 45%. and of that 45%, I already have coverage to the extent of 45%. Okay. So, again, as I said, it is not a very big number. If you look at our consolidated EBITDA, or not EBITDA, the operating profit as we call it, before provisions and tax of the subsidiaries plus us together, it was in the range of 59,000–60,000 crores. So, for us, this amount that may be required further should not pose a problem.
One more question on this broader NPA issue, which the finance minister again said that the government intends to crack down on the top 5 to 7 accounts across sort of categories. How soon do you expect that some resolution will come through on these 5 to 7 accounts?
See, this is very difficult for me to mention until and unless we see what is the framework that RBI is giving, and I am sure it will be a very well thought out framework. Until we see that, it would be very difficult to mention, because at the end of the day you must understand that these are big companies. The top 5 to 7 companies are all operating assets. They have workers, they have vendors, they have suppliers, there is a whole economy around them. So, you can't do anything suddenly. There might be a lot of other issues. They may be having contracts, they may be having licenses, they may be having approvals which may need to be transferred, which may need again to go back to various agencies. So, these are things that you can't talk about very quickly. But having said that, once the framework is there and you know how much of what will happen, then very quickly we can say that it is resolved to the extent that yes, I know the amount of hit I need to take, I know I can start booking income on these accounts, which is a very welcome thing. So, to that extent, in respect of the banks, at least we will be able to do it very quickly.
I know you don't talk about specific NPAs, but I will ask you on what has become the poster boy case.
No, I don't think I will answer that.
Sure.
So, I don't think you ask
Are you hopeful of that, of resolution there as well?
Let us see, let us see. See, it is something that will take time. But you must understand that we are an organization, we are not an individual. So, we have deep pockets and we will keep pursuing.
Sure. Okay, let me shift focus and talk about the central bank. Do you believe that the RBI erred on inflation projection? The latest reading has come in at 2.19%. There seems to be a difference of view between the finance ministry and the RBI, as is always. But do you think on hindsight the central bank erred on inflation projection?
See, it's very difficult to say on what basis they were projecting it. I am not privy to all of their basis. I can only say that internally within the bank we had projected for lower inflation. We continue to stick with that projection. I can tell you internally only because that is the data that I have access to.
Sure.
Okay, so for us we still believe that inflation is going to be very muted, given the fact that we have good rains on the way. I think that is something that is almost a given, because rains not only predict a good kharif crop, they also predict a good rabi crop. In fact, sometimes rabi is even better, because that time the risk of floods and things like that go away. So, to that extent, if you have 2 more crop seasons which are going to be good, and with the kind of emphasis we have put on keeping food prices under control, I believe that inflation will definitely undershoot rather than overshoot projections.
So, the government's view that there is a plausible alternate macroeconomic assessment and scope for substantive monetary policy easing. Do you agree with that? That with inflation likely to trend lower, there is scope for substantive monetary assessment? Which is the view of the government?
Whether it should be substantive or whether it should be minimal or whether it should be neutral, again, it is in the area of the central bank, and I do not want to step in that. However, having said that, this much I can say, that today there is a lot of liquidity, that liquidity is aiding transmission. We have, as you know, brought down rates appreciably, and if the rates come down, to that extent it is helpful towards growth. There has to be a balance between the two, because the moment you start bringing down rates, certain inflationary pressures do crop up. Okay? But having said that, I think India is in need of growth. Today, one of the biggest things that we have is, as I said, one of the things we believe must happen is better capacity utilization. For that you need demand, and for demand to grow you need growth. So, it is a kind of we need to come into a virtuous cycle. The higher interest and higher inflation is a vicious cycle. So, maybe we are exiting the vicious cycle and we should come into a virtuous cycle.
You spoke about liquidity in the market. Is there scope for lending rates and deposit rates to go down with status quo as far as the overall?
Let us see, let us see. We will have to check to see how credit growth picks up. and we will also have to see, you know, again the amount of money that is flowing out from the amount that was deposited during demonetization is still continuing. It has not completed its cycle, because the last of the curbs went away on the 17th of March. So we are not yet 1 quarter down. We need to be at least 5-6 months down from that date to determine what will be the resources that will remain with the banking system, and then take a call again.
So when is this likely to happen? The next
so maybe by another 2-3 months, you know, end of this quarter we will take a review as to how much of money still remains. By end of March we still had about 60% of the money with us, but it has been flowing out. So we need to take a call at the end of June, and maybe sometime in the beginning of the busy season is when the credit demand also picks up. So at that point of time, if the demand is not picking up that much, then we will need to take a call again.
Sure. You spoke about demonetization. How, you know, how have you in a sense changed your assessment of demonetization given the numbers that we've seen on the Q4 GDP front? An SBI document in the public domain also explains that demonetization has had an effect, and sort of it may linger over a period of time as well in terms of slowing down the economy. Are you in agreement with this assessment on the impact of demonetization?
No, see, there are two things. The SBI document that you are talking about is the document that we filed for the QIP.
Sure.
Now, frankly, in a QIP, you have to be very conservative, and you do not want to mislead investors in any manner. Sure. Therefore, if there is any risk where there is some percentage of chance it might happen, you need to flag it. Sure. So that bit that you are talking about is taken out of context. Okay. Sure. But on the demonetization, I think from day one we have been saying that the impact will be temporary, that there are two very large good impacts of demonetization, and they continue. One is of course the one I told you on additional resources, and the other is on digitalization. Digitalization, even though it had reached a very large peak and has come down, but it has plateaued. But that plateau is well above the one that we had before demonetization.
New normal has been.
Yes, there is a new normal that is set. So to that extent, I would say that digitalization has been advanced by 2 years in the space of 2 months. So these are two very positive fallouts, and from the beginning we have been saying this. So there is no change.
Sure. Since you spoke about QIP a little while ago, and it was a phenomenal success, you raised 15,000 crores, and there was a lot of demand for that issue. But do you believe there was a compelling need for that issue in the first place?
See, at any point of time, if you have more capital, it gives everybody more comfort. You know, Moody's has already said that it's a credit positive. Being the #1 bank in the country, we feel we need to be capitalized even more than what the government would probably give. And because we want to be less and less dependent on one source of capitalization, we felt that if the time is right, if the entire story is looking good, then it is the time to go to market. Also, you know, the last raising we did from the market was 3 years back, immediately after I had come in. If you remember, in January of 2014 is when we had raised. At that point of time also we had told investors we will come in about 2 years time. So we have gone to the market in about 3 years time. I think we timed it right. We are a big bank, we intend to grow, we intend to capture more market share. We are now a player in the global top 50. So I see no reason why we should not raise money when there is investor interest, and when we know that to these investors we will be able to give good return.
A few questions on non-core asset sale, Ms. Bhattacharya. You recently stated that you plan to raise capital via sale of non-core assets as well. Which are the assets that you plan to look at, and how soon will a roadmap be ready on that front?
See, one thing, the roadmap is already there internally. It is like this: we are already looking, as you know, in the insurance business, that QIP is more or less on track. So we will do that. There are various other smaller non-core assets that we are also looking at. So it could be, you know, stake sale in, maybe just now CDSL is coming. After that NSE is supposed to come. CCIL is there. That's also on the cards. So that will be a private sale.
If that were
UTI AMC is there. So that's also part of it. So there are lots of things that we have, but these will yield small amounts. We are not looking at very large amounts. So let's see how it goes.
And the life insurance IPO, that's something as well that you've spoken about.
That's absolutely something that's on the cards. Again, that story is a fantastic story. Today, I would think that it's the best private life insurance company that's there out there. It's doing very well, its growth is fantastic, its margins are good, its mis-sell complaints are the lowest in the industry. In every which way, you know, we have also sort of handheld that company to come up to this space. But mind you, it is not only this company. There are other companies that are doing equally well that will go down the line. So whether it be my cards company, whether it be my mutual fund company, cards company came from number 4 to number 2, and last month we have now reached the same spot as HDFC for acquiring. Okay, so going forward, this can only get better. Same with the mutual fund company, again going great guns. So you know, there will be other companies that will come up, and we are just about going to do a JV for our payments venture, payment services company, and very good interest from international names over there as well. So there also we are planning on selling some amount of stake. So there will be lots of things that we will be doing, and it may not all come in this year, but we do have a plan.
Some of these IPOs, you think, other than life insurance, any other IPO that you think
no,
will happen
no other IPOs this year.
But life insurance will happen this year. Obviously, a few questions on the personal side. You know, you sort of broke the glass ceiling by being the first woman to be the chairman of SBI. How would you look back at the journey, and would you say that you enjoyed far more independence than you thought you would, because you come across as this, you know, straight talking banker, you know, sort of never fit into the stereotype of the so-called PSU banker, so to say. Would you say that you enjoyed more independence? How much of independence did you have? The reason I'm asking this in the context of what Mr. Arvind Subramanian said when he said that, you know, bankers don't really speak their mind, etc., etc. So how would you look back at your journey in that context?
Well, I don't know. I have been speaking my mind all this while, I think. But the fact of the matter is, you have to understand, nobody really directs us as to what to speak. Nobody. And I think, you know,
not even the government?
No. If you think that that's the case, then you have a wrong idea about what PSBs are all about. We have certain processes we need to follow. For instance, you take the IPO. I had to do a proper RFP. I had to get on board merchant bankers. For that, I had to have a committee that had to assess, that had to document. So all of these will need to get done. Okay. End of the day, whoever gives the lowest bid, we'll have to go by that, otherwise they can't get on board. These are processes that we have to follow. Okay? If we don't, then there could be difficulties. But that doesn't mean that you cannot do things that you really want to do. Yes, there are difficulties in things like, say, recruitment. Recruitment, we still have difficulties, because again, I have to do a process, and the process takes very long. I can't go on campus and get, you know, ready-made people. So what do? I get very good brains all the same, but I get them from tier 2, tier 3 cities, people who have not been to management colleges. Then it falls on me to polish them and make them into, you know, shining diamonds instead of the rough diamonds I get. Whereas maybe the private sector are getting diamonds that are already polished. That's the difference. But the fact of the matter is that yes, there are certain difficulties in PSBs. Just as I am polishing the diamonds, it will be very easy for somebody to plug that diamond and take it away if I am not able to keep them. So there are certain structural issues which has been flagged to the government. I am hoping that they will address them. But that does not mean that we are not allowed to speak to the media at large or internally, or even to them. For that matter, the government is very open and we very often interact with them. And I don't think there has been ever any problem on independence actually.
Sure.
And they have been really quite hands-on.
Sure. Since you were the first woman to be the chairman of SBI, did being a woman make a difference at all? And were you sort of surprised that you didn't have a predecessor who was a woman in all these years?
No, I wasn't really surprised, because you know what has happened is, it takes time for any class of people to reach a particular level. The number of women entering the bank actually started going up during the time when we entered. That is in the late 70s, it started going up from say mid 70s. Now obviously, you know, it takes time for sufficient numbers to build up in order to reach the C-suite, and that has now happened, because of which you will find that a number of my DMDs are also women. So you know, it takes time for them to come up, but even then I still will say that women are still not there in sufficient numbers. We are 50% of the population. So if I take 1800 people, I would expect 900 or at least 850 to be women, which is not the case. Even today, women are about 30% of the people entering. You have seen the IITs. you've seen the top 100, you've seen how many are girls. So I think there are still stereotypes we are working out of, and it will take time. It will take another 3 or 4 generations, but by that time I think we'll reach parity.
Last question, you're due to retire in a few months from now. Have you thought of life beyond SBI? How tough is it going to be for you? You've been with the bank for so many years, over 3 decades.
Yeah, it's almost like Linus in the Peanuts, they have he has a security blanket, which Snoopy keeps taking off. So it's like SBI has been like a security blanket. So when you take it away, obviously there's going to be a transition, but I'm sure I'll find something that's interesting. And means frankly, I have a lot of interests, and I'm not all that wedded only to banking. So we'll see how things go, and I'm sure there is a life beyond the bank. But I will always treasure my years here. This bank is very strange in the sense that not only does it give you a lot of scope, it gives you a lot of support even where your family and things are concerned. Means I have never worried if my daughter has fallen sick and I am somewhere else, because there is always somebody to take care. It will be a spouse's wife, colleague's wife, colleague's spouse, or it will be somebody from a colleague itself. So there is a lot of interdependence that we sort of nurture over a period of time. So obviously when you move away from that, there is always a feeling of a vacuum or a loss. But anyway, nature abhors a vacuum, so I'm sure it will get filled in time.
Wish you the very best for that journey. Thank you so much, ma'am, for talking to us. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.